Welcome! Pivot tables are amazing tools to summarize and analyze data. But as soon as anything changes in the source data, we've got to refresh them to keep them up to date. This video tutorial offers an ultimate guide on how to refresh a pivot table in Excel to make sure the pivot table shows the right, most up-to-date data. Ready to start? Hello, and welcome to EasyClick Academy. My name's Maria, and together with our EasyClick team, we're here to make sure you'll be able to use Excel in a quick and easy way, thanks to our digestible video tutorials. When working with pivot tables, we must keep in mind that if anything changes in the source data, it won't automatically show in the pivot table. Let's have a look at how it actually works. We start with clicking into Sheet 1, which contains our source data, and we rewrite this number, which is the value of the sales for Store 1 in the category Smartphones, to $15,000 US. If we go back to Sheet 2, which contains our pivot table, we can see that it shows no change in values. That's why we've got to refresh the pivot table, and this is how we do that. We click anywhere in the pivot table so that the Pivot Table tab appears. There, we click on Refresh, and that's it. Excel has updated the pivot table with the most up-to-date sums. So, if you simply rewrite a value in the source data, you can just refresh the pivot table and you don't have to do anything else. However, adding new rows or columns, which basically changes the source data range, might be a bit trickier. We can take a look at how to deal with this more advanced source data update now. Let's start with a very important detail: the way the pivot table pulls data from the source, because that can have a great impact on the result. This we can check by clicking anywhere within the pivot table area and finding the option Change Data Source in the Pivot Table tab. Here, we can see whether the data source is a table or a directly specified range of cells. Here it says Table, which makes it easier to add a row or a column if needed, because with tables, Excel automatically updates the source range. But if the field contains a manually entered range, it'll need to be updated manually every time a row or a column is added. That's why it's useful to prepare and organize the source data effectively and format them as a table in advance. To see how to do that, watch our previous video tutorial titled How to Create a Pivot Table in Excel, where you can find a detailed description of how to organize source data in the best possible way. You can find the link to the video in the description below. We're not going to change the range here because we want to use the table that's already been specified in the field. So we can press Cancel and move on. We'll now click back into our source data and have a look at the benefits of having the data formatted as a table. Let's say we want to add a new row with new data at the very end of the table. So we'll add one with the date 20th of September 2024, and here we go. Excel automatically includes the new row within the original table. This means that the range from which our pivot table pulls data has been updated. When you've formatted the source data as a table, you can add as many rows or columns as you like, and you can always be sure that the range for the pivot table is defined correctly. After we've added a new row, we can now add a completely new category, for example, audio, and we'll be able to watch how this gets reflected in our pivot table later on. The same way works if we need to delete rows or columns. Let's delete these rows and see how the table area with the data range changes immediately. This shows that it actually matters whether we have the source data formatted as a table or entered manually as a range. So, we've made several changes to our source data, and we can click back to Sheet 2, which contains our pivot table. And this we've got to refresh the way you already know. Now, we won't use the button up here, but we click anywhere within the pivot table area, then we right-click and look up Refresh in the list of options here. And that's all it takes. The pivot table has clearly been refreshed, because now we can see the new category, Audio, added a while ago to the source data. And before we finish, let's take a look at one more way to refresh the pivot table. This one works automatically, but there's a catch. So click anywhere within the pivot table, then right-click and on the list find Pivot Table Options. Move the window aside a bit and click on the tab Data. Here we can take the option Refresh Data when opening the file, Although it might seem quite practical, that's also the actual catch, that the data will be refreshed only after you've opened the file. However, anytime you open the file, you can be sure your pivot table is up to date. If you found this tutorial helpful, give us a like and watch other video tutorials by EasyClick Academy. Learn how to use Excel in a quick and easy way. Is this your first time on EasyClick? We'll be more than happy to welcome you in our online community. Hit that subscribe button and join the EasyClickers. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.